Hey, what's up guys, it's John here. So I got another video for you guys with some mods that I'm going to be doing on my Viper, of course. So let's get into that stuff and we'll get started. Okay, so these are some mods again from IPSCO, so it came in this box. I've got a bunch of different stuff. Here's one piece, another, this one, this, and some nut and bolts. So let's go over this stuff. So this here is a polyurethane transmission mount. It's pretty generic. It came from IPSCO, but this is also a replacement part for a lot of different GMs, so it's very similar. So that we're going to put on to stiffen the transmission. This is IPSCO's billet cross brace. So this is supposed to give the chassis more rigidity. It goes between the tunnel, the transmission tunnel. So that's supposed to stiffen that stuff up. And this one here is the short throw shifter. So with the short throw shifter, of course, it's going to change the pivot point in the mechanism. Makes the throws shorter in the shifter. And the last one here is the shortened shift height. So this actually lowers the OEM shifter. This bolts into here, and then this bolts into my OEM shifter, and it's supposed to actually lower the whole thing. So these are the pieces I have. This is just some nuts and bolts and stuff like that. I guess a little bit of RTV for the gasket on the shift boot too. So I'm gonna go ahead. I've already jacked up the car. Car's on 4 jack stands. Jack's there just for safety. I always do that. I'm gonna start with underneath the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the old transmission mount and this brace. And I'm also gonna lower the transmission. In the IPSCO instructions, they actually get you to do everything from the top, but since I'm gonna go ahead and put these on the bottom, I'm gonna probably save myself quite a bit of work from the top. So normally you have to drill some holes to get at some bolts, but if I can lower the transmission a bit, I can probably avoid having to drill any holes in my car. So I'm gonna go underneath, take off that pan and the bottom, and we'll get started with those 2 brackets, or the bracket and the mount. Okay, so these are the bolts that have to be removed to get to this pan. This pan has to come off so that we can get to access to the transmission, and the brace is actually right underneath here. So let's go ahead and take off these bolts and we'll drop this pan. Okay, so I just dropped this pan and I noticed the tail shaft on the Tremec is a little bit wet. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this seal, and I'm gonna go get a seal and replace this since I'm in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to remove the seal right now, take off this drive shaft. We're just removing these bolts in the rear. I've got them soaking in some PB Blaster, and we'll see how we make out. So let's try that. Alright, so on the back of the drive shaft, I just removed these 2 bolts to remove the drive shaft, and now I'm going to rotate the drive shaft so I can get the other 2 out. So the other 2 right here, bring this around, and now I can access these 2. So I already got the other ones free. I don't think they've ever been removed, so they're in there really good, but a little bit of PB Blaster definitely helps soak in there. I tried soaking those ones from the top, but I'm going to put a bit more PV on it and then remove these 2. Get this drive shaft out, take that seal out, and put the new seal in. Alright, there we go. We got it. You did the trick. It did. Puke all over me. Hey. Alright, so the drive shaft is out. Here is the seal that we want to take out. Disconnect the drive shaft from the U-joint. Alright, so let's pop out the rest of the seal and we can start on putting in a new one. Alright, so the seal came flying up out of there, and let's take a look at the new one we're going to put in. Alright, so this is the new seal I got. It's pretty cheap actually because it's the same as pretty much the Mustangs and all those other T56. I got an SKF one, so obviously it's a decent brand, but yeah, they're only a few bucks. They're not expensive at all. So as far as a seal driver, you can actually have a seal driver, or you can go to your neighbor's house and find some plumbing equipment. So I got this. This is gonna fit onto here perfectly. This is actually a 2-inch ABS end cap, and it slips over nicely, and it actually works as a perfect seal driver for this. So let's go ahead and pop that in. Okay, so the new seal is installed. The seal face is flush with the transmission housing now. And as you can see, basically you want to tap in a direction that's kind of rotational, so you're working all sides evenly, and then it goes in smooth, flat, and goes in nicely. So let's go ahead and put in the drive shaft now. Okay, so the pan's removed from the bottom, but I just want to go over a few things before I start changing any of the transmission mounts or the cross brace. So this is a stock shifter. My car's a driver, so it has about 65,000 miles on it. So I just want to go over how sloppy this actual shifter is at this point. So you can see visually that there's a ton of play in this thing. This is still in first gear, and I got all this play. If you start putting the tape on this, I got this, you know, I'm just gonna use a reference point off of the mirror adjustment knob here. But it looks like it's sitting at about 5.5 inches, and I have almost an inch play before it even starts to do anything. So if I go from first gear all the way to second, it's 11 inches. So there's a ton of throw in this. But you know, more importantly is all this play that we have, and also of course these long throws, 11 inches all the way to 5.5. And if I go from third gear, still about 5.5, maybe, you know, 5.25, all the way back to looks like 11 inches. So there's a ton of throw, so I'm hoping to shorten this up and get rid of a bunch of this play. So let's get started, and we'll start taking this apart. Once I have all the dash apart, then I can lower the transmission and go from there. Okay, so first we're gonna remove this console bezel here. You're gonna wanna pry this up with something gentle. It's not gonna rip or tear or make any marks in your dashboard here. So I have this plastic style tool that I can pry here and not worry about marking anything. As per the IPSCO, it actually shows you where all the tabs are located. So in these two corners with the green, you have the Velcro, and then you also have the locking tabs here in these red areas. So we're gonna go ahead and pry those out. Okay, so first we're gonna remove the ashtray. Put this off to the side. They also say to move these accessory knobs all horizontal. I'm not sure why it makes a difference, but we'll do it anyways. And then we want to start prying up here. Alright, so on the back side, now that you got the bezel free, there's going to be these 3 connectors that you're going to want to loosen up, and also the one for the cigarette lighter. So they're all just these squeeze clips. Squeeze the button, pop them off, and we'll take these off and then we'll remove the bezel. Okay, so next we're going to want to remove the shift knob. So we'll go ahead and throw a wrench on here and start turning it off. Alright, so I went to start removing the shift knob, and the base is actually spinning down here. So when I turn this, the bottom is spinning inside the shift mechanism. So I'm gonna have to move the console up and then see if I can get a wrench underneath so that I can get the shift knob off here. So let's go ahead and take off the console. Console's held on by 4 Phillips screws, one here, and 2 on the sides. So one here and then one on the other side. So we'll take out those 4 screws and we'll see if we can get the shift knob off. Alright, so for some reason yours does the same thing. You can go ahead and do this. So what I did was slid the boot down enough so I could fit vice grips over it and put the wrench on there to loosen it off. And now I can take the shift knob off. So I'm going to go ahead and take this completely off, and then I can get this console out of here. Okay, so I got the vice grips underneath. You can now spin this shift knob off. Okay, next steps, we want to drill out all these rivets so that we can take off this lower shift boot, and then we can access the bolts to the top of the transmission to get the shift mechanism out. So let's go ahead and drill these out. Alright, so probably as you can tell that was a real pain in the ass. These are all steel rivets, so they're not exactly the easiest to drill out, and you have to be super careful because you have the rubber around here which can melt if you heat up each rivet too much, or if you slip with your drill bit you can drill through the rubber. So you want to kind of cycle them a little bit, don't get it too hot that it melts the rubber, and at the same time be very careful on the boot. So I got them all off. As you can see, I probably used this to pry some of them when they were getting close. So I used that to pry off the rivet head just when it was getting close to separate it, and then this to also pry up the boot off from there. So I'm gonna vacuum all this stuff up, clean off all these shavings, and finish removing the rivets. I'm gonna drill them down lower and then hit them at the bottom. We'll go ahead and do that. So a little bit more drilling, then we'll vacuum this up, and then we'll get started on the actual shifter. Alright, so we have everything off, the boot's off. Now you can see the shift mechanism right here. That's one of the bolts. The other one is down there at the back, a little bit hard to see, and then the two other are hiding underneath the ashtray area. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the transmission. Normally that you would drill a hole in the ashtray and then here if you wanted to access it from the top, but I'm going to lower the transmission a little bit, and then I can probably sneak my hand in to get into those two bolts that are a little bit hidden. Let's go ahead and get under the car, remove the transmission mount and brace, and then drop the transmission a little bit. We'll keep going. Alright, so we are under the car. We're going to first remove the nut that connects the transmission mount to the cross brace. It's a 15mm nut. And then once we're done that, we're going to remove this bolt, also 15mm and the nut, and this bolt with the 15mm and the nut. So go ahead and remove that stuff, and then we can get at these two bolts here which hold the actual transmission mount to the transmission. So let's get started. Okay, so I've removed this nut, the nuts off the back, and these are both loose. So I'm sure it's already pretty obvious that I have the transmission supported with the jack. So what I'm going to do is pump the jack a little bit, remove any pressure from here so that I know I'm free to take out these bolts. So if I jack this up, you can see that the transmission is no longer supported by this brace, and I'm free to take out these bolts. Here's one. There's two, and this should come out now. Alright, you may need a small dead blow hammer or a plastic hammer so you don't damage anything to remove this. Just to tap it out. It usually gets stuck between these two brackets here. Yeah, you can see how snug it is in these brackets here, so try this out. And she's free. So now we're gonna remove these two bolts that are holding this mount on so that we can replace it with the pump. Okay, so now that all the hardware is removed, I'm going to go ahead and lower this jack a little bit so I can get a little more room up top so I can disconnect the shifter and get that out of here. You want to be very careful when lowering the jack, of course, so you don't drop the transmission all the way down. Alright, so we're back up top, and as you can see we have a lot more room now that the transmission is lowered. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those 13mm bolts, the four that are holding the shift linkage or mechanism in place. So I'm going to do that. There's not going to be much to see because I can only fit my hand in there and not the camera at the same time. So I'll go ahead and take out those 4 bolts, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so as you can see, I've removed the shifter mechanism and we're left with this. So the mating surface looks clean. I think some of them come with a paper gasket, but mine had RTV already on it. So it was pretty much all came off clean. I'm also going to remove that bushing that you see in there too. So I'm going to pop that out too, because I got a new one that I'm going to put in to replace to make sure that I don't have any sloppiness when I do this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that, hopefully with some needle nose pliers, and comes out decent, and we'll move on. Alright, so this is an extra step that I took. It's not recommended by IPSCO, but I wanted to point something out since I'm pretty meticulous with stuff like this. This is the bushing that actually goes in the top of the transmission. Like I said, it's a bushing, it's a wearable item. So in order to pull it out, there's not much to catch the lip on. I tried, prying it out with maybe some needle nose or grabbing it, or prying it out, it wouldn't go. So what I did was I put this bolt in. It's a 7/16 bolt, and I put a nut on the end, and then I was able to pry it straight out of the transmission. But I want to point something out to you guys. So some of you guys might skip this step, but this is gonna tighten up your transmission too. So you can actually see the exterior of this is deteriorating. I'm sure you can see that big chunk there. So this will actually give you extra play in your shifter, which the whole purpose of doing this is to get rid of it. So I wouldn't skip this step. This bushing is really cheap. You can buy it from your local Mustang store if you don't want to have the Viper tax. I bought my bushing online and I think it was only about $5. So I have this bushing. I'm gonna replace it. Like I said, this one really looks like it's had its day. You can see right there the lip on it of the portion that's deteriorating. There's a chunk, and yeah, it's really just it's had its time. I mean, it's old, right? So I'm gonna replace this. I'm gonna put that new one in, and then we'll be almost ready to put the new shift linkage in. Alright, so as usual guys, I like to do a little bit of comparison before I start throwing stuff together. So here is the old mechanism and the new one. So first things first, again, I really want to stress this bushing. Like you can see, the outside of it is deteriorated on the exterior, so the outside of this bushing is worn, and also the inside. It actually has quite a bit of slop. When I put it on this shift mechanism, I can actually move it back and forth. So I'm not sure how much you can see that, you guys, but you can feel there is slop there, and I'm sure you guys can agree that a little bit of slop here at the end of your shifter is going to translate into quite a bit of play. So this tiny bit is going to make a difference, and that doesn't even include the the slop that it probably had in the actual mechanism of the transmission to the slop there. So that's got a new one, and then comparing this one to the new IPSCO, one interesting difference that I did notice is this. So if I put them flush to flush like this, you can see that the peg or post, whatever you want to call it, this pivot point that extends into the transmission is much longer on the new one. So this one I think is going to be further seated into the actual bushing, whereas before maybe this one was hanging out and this one's going to be deeper into this bushing, because I mean the mating surface is the same, so this obviously post has to be sitting lower into this bushing when it's installed in the transmission. So that's one major difference. And then down here, of course, I don't know why Dodge has this rubber mounted I don't even know what to call it, kind of shift post or something, but this has play in it too. So I don't know if I can do this with two hands here, but you can see that. Let's see if I can set this up. You can see that this has play in it. So I'm not sure how well I can illustrate that, but there we go. So you can see that this actually has quite a bit of play in it too. So when I put the new system on, it's going to have this, as well as have this solid mounted bushing here. So this will go into there, and we won't have any play, hopefully. So let's go ahead and get that assembled, and then we'll start installing this. I'm going to put a small dab of high temp grease on the actual pivot point here, so that when it's installed, it's It's got a little bit there. That should be enough, nothing too crazy. Alright, I think we're pretty well ready. I'm going to put some silicone on the edge of the transmission once we get over there. I've already cleaned that up. Alright, so as you can hopefully mostly see, apologize that I'm not able to film a little bit more with this, but this is the access hole that we're working with, and once my hands go in there you can't really see much. So here's the short throw shifter mechanism, there's the 4 bolts, here's the RTV. I've cleaned the mating surface up here, so I'm going to apply the RTV on the transmission side of things, just so that I actually know where it's touching. If you put silicone on this side of it, you know, you might miss or overshoot the actual housing. If I put it on this side, I know for sure that it's going to contact where it needs to on the actual shifter mechanism. So I'm going to go ahead, put the RTV on there, and then we'll get this in there and we'll start bolting it down. Alright, so the short throw is installed, the bolts are tightened. Again, I apologize for the crappy footage, but again, I'm doing the best I can with what I'm working with as far as visibility and being able to show you guys where my hands are. So yeah, that's in. All those 13mm bolts are installed. IPSCO did include longer bolts because that mechanism is actually a little bit longer, so those new bolts are in there, everything's tight. And now we have to focus on the transmission cross brace and that new transmission polyurethane mount. So let's go and compare the old to the new on those as well. Okay, so one other thing I want to mention that I forgot to tell you guys too before I completely discard this old shifter mechanism is you can actually see how much play is in this inside here. So I don't know if you guys can hear this click. That's actually the play inside this big ball joint here. I don't know if I can get a visual on it. So hopefully you guys can see that, but there's quite a bit of play right in the center here. Back and forth, left to right. Tons of play in this mechanism in the middle here. So this is definitely due. Like I said, my car has about 65,000 on it, so I don't know if they're all like this, or obviously my car has a bit more wear on it, but yeah, definitely a lot of play there, here, and then in that bushing. Alright, so we are once again underneath the car because who does not enjoy laying underneath the car at night? So here is the mount. The instructions here also say that this bump, if you look at the bump on this side, nothing here. This bump has to face the back or rear of the vehicle. So we're going to put it like this and toss it in there. And we're going to use the supplied bolt they gave us with the lock washers and washers. So let's get this in here. There's one holding it. And 2. Alright, so that is snug. Next, we're going to raise the transmission a tiny bit. Alright, so you're going to notice on the brace that it has a hole here and it's off center. So the transmission actually sits slightly to the passenger side. So you're going to want to make sure this off center hole is to that side. And go ahead and put this in here. So put it in here. Use our hammer here, tap it in place. We actually want it to go this way a tiny bit. Alright, so we should be able to get these bolts in. There's one bolt. And so it'll come down a tiny bit. 2 bolts. And our nuts. Alright, so we're actually screwing it in. Everything seems to be lining up pretty nicely. You want to do this by hand so that you don't cross thread anything, but yeah, it seems to be going in by itself. And this is snug, so I can relieve some of the pressure again on the jack. Alright, snug this up a bit more. So that is snug there. I could probably tighten these down because there's a ton of play in those. Alright, so that's nice and tight. Can relieve the pressure on the jack. Alright, and she is in place. So let's go up top and see. Okay, so as per the IPSCO instructions, we're supposed to temporarily just install the shift knob and make sure that we can get in a reverse and there's no clearance issues. The clearance issues that they are talking about is if you look there and you see that big Allen head bolt there, it actually is very close to touching this recess for the ashtray. So that bolt has to have enough clearance so that it doesn't touch this ashtray, and if it does, then you're supposed to move the whole transmission further to the driver's side so that you have the clearance for that. So we'll go ahead and test the gears. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and then reverse. I've tried this, it's a little bit more work, but all the way over and up, and it goes in. But definitely a lot more effort to put it in reverse than before, but it does go, and that's the test we're supposed to do to make sure that we can still hit reverse, and we're good to go. So we can go ahead, take the shift knob off, and then start installing the console again. So let's go ahead and take this off. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and install the boot, the rubber boot. IPSCO says to put RTV silicone on the bottom of this, but I'm not going to bother. Just because I never had it before, and I don't really care about it being, you know, a weather tight seal or perfect seal. It's just a dust boot, more or less. So also, you want to make sure that your bracket's still flat. A lot of times it gets a little bit bent when you're prying up the rivets. Mine was a little bit tweaked, so I had to straighten it out. So go ahead and, you know, adjust it as needed so that when you look at it from the side profile that it's actually flat. So let's drop this in here. That fits like so. We'll be tucking this around here. And then instead of those rivets, they have these nice little push pins. So basically when you push this down, it expands. So go ahead and pop those in. Okay, so you want to spin your shifter on. I just spun this on just now. One thing is there is a locking nut down here that you can't really slide the boot down low enough to be able to grab. So what you can do though is find out where about it's supposed to be, and then you can actually feel that lock nut and spin it with your hand through the boot, and then you can crank this down. So, right, so here's the console. Okay, so if we go based on our same reference point as before, just below the window, or not the window, but the mirror switch here, you can see now we're at 6.5 inches, maybe 6 3/4, whereas before we were at 5.5 inches. So we're sitting at about, like I said, 6.5 inches or so. And then the throw, if you remember before, was 5.5, and I believe it was all the way to 11, where second gear was. So right now we're at 6.5, and when I go into second, we're at 10. So from 5.5 to 11 was 5.5 inches, and now from 6.5 to 10 is 3.5 inches. So we shortened the throw 2 inches, and also look at how rock solid this is when it's in gear now. Before, if you remember, there's a ton of play, left to right. I got essentially no play. So when I'm in gear, I'm definitely in gear now. So everything tightened up between the bushing, or that weird isolator that's here, the play that was in the actual mechanism, and then the play that was in that little plastic bushing that was actually in the transmission. So everything's tightened up now. So I think it's gonna be a lot better. I haven't driven it yet, but I'll do a review video afterwards on how I think it feels. But we'll go ahead and we'll install the pan on the bottom, and then we're done. Alright, so this is the installed product down below with everything tightened, and that polyurethane bushing in place and everything aligned. We've got the new tail shaft seal in there as well. And I don't know if you can see, but up there is the red short throw shifter mechanism. So now I'm going to go ahead and install this belly pan or underpan. And guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot of review videos on that short throw shifter, and also more videos to come. Take care, guys.
What we do here is go back.
Loud.